All right, all right. Happy Friday. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sab Show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I'm here with an awesome panel tonight. We have Nick. What's going on, Nick?
What's up, Sabs? My revolutionary blackout sister. Good to be here.
And we have Franco.
Hey Sabrina and Nick, it's great to be here.
And hopefully Eric pops back on, but we also have Eric too. Um, Definitely shout out to everyone watching on YouTube. What's going on? People watching on Twitch too and Twitter. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Um, I just want to go ahead. We're gonna wait for Eric. Oh, here he comes. Okay, Eric, you good? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe he can't hear us. Uh oh, he's gone. We'll give him just a couple seconds. Um, Shoot, I forgot to do this. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. I don't know what's going on with my equipment, but apologies. Hi.
That's why I don't plug things in because I mess things up when I start plugging things in. All right, guys. And we also have Eric here as well. Um, so Eric came up with a cool idea. He came up with the idea of having a list of demands that I think is really important. So we're doing a solutions panel tonight. And Eric, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to you because one of the things we've been talking about a lot of times is like we talk about the problems, but we also want to talk about possible solutions. And one of the things that Eric kind of made me realize is that we don't really have a list of demands, the things that we're asking for, the things that we want. So Eric came up with a list and we're going to go ahead and go through those. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Sabby. Um, all right. So one of the things that I've been hearing a lot of people say, kind of in our lefty spaces and whatnot, is I'm done with electoral politics. Or I'm done with electoralism. And kind of a question that came to my mind is what do we really mean when we say that? What even is electoral politics? And there's kind of two potential meanings kind of come to my mind, and there's kind of the way we've been doing it, and kind of the duopoly, trying to elect Democrats and hoping they'll do better, and I think most of the people kind of in the spaces that we hang out with are very much done with that, and I definitely agree with that. And so then there's the more general concept of what if we substitute electoral politics for democracy? Do we are we saying that we're done with democracy in general? And I guess personally, I'm really not ready to throw in the towel on democracy. I mean, I think we need to have a government. We need to have a government that's run democratically, and run democratically in terms of one person, one vote. And of course, right now it's $1, one vote, and so that kind of gets us into the money. And I think we need to be talking more about the money and focusing on the money, and that's part of what I'm going to be talking about in my kind of potential list here that I'll jump into. So when the general strike was happening, one of the things that I kept thinking is what are the demands, or when the general strike discussions were happening. And so, like, if we're going to have strikes or protests, I mean, we have to have demands. And so this was an attempt, I called it a proposed list of demands, for general strike or leftists in general. It's kind of an attempt to at least get a conversation going about what a coherent set of demands might look like, and something that we could kind of put on leaders and candidates to say, are you with this or not? So it's kind of in two parts. The first part is more along the lines of the kind of general demands that I think we've all been talking about, and I think there's pretty broad agreement on in terms of the left that we would consider the true left. And the second part gets more into systemic solutions of how we might get there. So I'll try to go through them here kind of fairly quickly. So the first one is basically Medicare for all, but trying to take it maybe a step further, saying, let's shoot for more along the ideas of a United States national healthcare system. And look at what's happening elsewhere in the world. We want to reject all privatization schemes. One of the problems right now with Medicare is it's becoming more and more privatized, and we need to be going the opposite. And of course, to be holistic in its coverage, cover everything.
I want to just jump in
Sure.
really quick about that because I have a question. And Franco probably has more information about this than I do. In reference to like the U.S. national healthcare system and Medicare for all, I think one of the problems that we've come across is Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all bill. And Franco, if you want to like add on to this as well, that there's problems with the bill. So I'll let Franco add on.
So that bill, HR 1976, the one that Pramila Jayapal supposedly wrote, that AOC and such were promoting, this one is, it was written by lobbyists. So there's a lot in there in that fine print in which corporations will benefit from. So I agree with with a universal healthcare system, but not the one that's in this bill, because this one was written by lobbyists, and so it's a Trojan horse for these people to benefit off of our expense. It's a Trojan horse to implement more automation, and I will have an interview soon going deeper into that, because it's a lot of pages in that bill that really need to be gone over. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the general things out there are these huge bills. And I feel like one of the things we need to be demanding is just to not have these huge omnibus bills. It's just ways to just put in all kinds of crap. So in general, that's kind of why I kind of am trying to call it something different, and not, we may even, get away from even the Medicare for all label and say, let's have national health care. Let's have it at least as good as what UK and Canada are doing. We can even, we should be able to have a system that's better than theirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all knew that Medicare for all was the compromise.
Yeah.
It just to try to weaken the insurance companies as we know it, to try and save as many lives as possible, and a lot of people advocate for that because they through our system. Because if we talk about nationalizing the healthcare system, because we talking about solutions, this is the solution panel. What would that actually entail? And we're going to discuss this later on in this live stream. I'm assuming, but that is not a power I believe that will allow us to vote away, right? So I believe a lot of people advocate for Medicare for all, almost as a way as just to ease the blow as much as possible. I think that would be my assessment of it, because the only way we get to nationalize the system, we got to have like a complete working class movement ready for, I think, armed struggle. But that, once again, we can talk about that maybe later on in the stream. But yeah, we all knew that Medicare for all was the compromise, I would think.
Yeah.
That's all I'd have.
And the legislation should be written by the people, not by the lobbyists.
Yeah, I agree.
So that way there won't be anything in there hidden in the fine print that's going to be a Trojan horse, that's going to be our oppression.
Yeah, that's important.
All good points.
But also just a quick question: who are we demanding this to? We're demanding this to the government.
I would say demand, basically the whole thing. I mean, the government, yes, any representative. I mean, I think we should be like when I remember there was that video recently where Amy Klobuchar was being protested, and they wouldn't let her speak. You know, she basically ran from that with her tail between her legs. You know, they had signs, they were yelling, they were loud, and you know what I think we should be doing is doing that to all of them. You know, not just Klobuchar, Cinema, or Manchin, but really, you know, any Democrat. But if we're going to do that, I think we have to have something clear that we're asking for. You know, that we're demanding. When they did it to Klobuchar, it was pretty basic. I mean, they wanted an end to that pipeline. They wanted her to stop support of the pipeline. They wanted her to end the pipeline. And so, you know, that's kind of the concept I'm kind of going for here is to have our demands and to get difficult about them, to get loud about them, to not take no for an answer, and to start saying, you know, we're not going to support you, we're not going to praise you, you know, we're done, unless, you know, you're ready to sign on to our demands.
So I don't think that they'll listen to us. I think there's too much power in DC right now that's being controlled by people we can't even see. Like the ruling class has so much influence on our politicians, even the ones that pose as progressives. So I think we can have some demands here, but or some ideals of what we want our society to be like. Like it can be for us, like some plans of how we want an ideal country to be like, but I don't think that these people are going to give it to us. I think that DC should be abolished altogether.
Well, I mean, you know, we're kind of talking about two different things then, but in any case, I would say our greatest power is in our numbers. You know, that's really what we have. And so part of what I would propose is to try to rally people, try to get that energy. You know, we saw a version of it, you know, with the Bernie campaign. I mean, you had millions of people who got on board with that, and you know, I think it's a lot because he gave them something. Now there were certainly huge flaws there, but I think it showed some real potential. Um,
Let's let's go ahead and go through the rest of them, and then maybe circle back.
yeah, so number two is respond to climate emergency, um, pass a non-corporate Green New Deal. And that gets into, you know, the idea that, you know, of course, they're going to try to make it a big corporate giveaway. Um, and so, you know, it needs to that needs to be pushed back against, needs to be dealt with. I mean, the other thing I'm saying is that none of these things are easy, you know, but none of the stuff is easy. End all drilling and extraction of federal property and subsidies, expand green subsidies. So I think that's all pretty straightforward. Um, Criminal justice reform. Now this I basically just put it over to the 10 demands for justice that Nick and his group made. That, you know, I love that. You know, that was, you know, really part of an inspiration of what I'm trying to do here was what was done there. Um, and kind of, you know, I feel like if when there was the Frank the Black Lives Matter protests, I feel like, you know, what was missing were like clear demands from those protests. You know, I wish that every one
That
of
was
those
exactly the
protests had big
mindset.
signs. Mm-hmm.
That was exactly the mindset we had because we saw all the energy at the George Floyd protest, and I'm like, all right, we gotta make sure we have solid list of demands because these are, if you go through the demands, these are things that activists are doing right now in local governments that is reducing the power of police, right? So you gotta be able to separate truly revolutionary acts and acts that I consider to be community defense, right? So when you have a lot of these local like politics and like community programs that you implement and fight for, these may not immediately change the system, but you can help change the power structure of your community just by implementing things like 10 demands in your community. Like these things are possible on the local level. Like you're not going to challenge the national security state this way, but we're talking about building the mechanism needed to have the movement where we can actually make large gains. So imagine if you had a lot of isolated wins on local areas, and then you have a lot of different movements that are not funneled, that is not hijacked by a managerial class, that is represented by a party. You got like a straight up uh, horizontal based movement. So, and this is what a lot of people get wrong, because you look at like the plans of a lot of social democrats, a lot of justice democrats, and what they advocate for. A lot of these people, they didn't show up for the Medicare for All march, just for example, because they didn't see the immediate route to get Medicare for All. They said, well, it's not going to pass, so what's the point of doing this? You see how they was trained to see movement building through the lens of electoral politics. If you can't get it done within 2 years, you might well not advocate for it. If that route for a change is ahistorical. And a lot of these managerial leftists, they lead us down that path on purpose because they know it's not effective. But I do want to pass it back to Eric, but I do want to chime in because that was our mindset with 10 demands, because we slowly build our way up, and we give a guideline locally on how you can get there, like demanding reducing the police budget at a certain level every year. Like people always say, "Oh, you guys are advocating for this. How are you going to immediately get rid of the police budget?" It's not about that. It's about you can fight on a local level and fight for the reduction of police budget every year until you get the desired result needed. But anyway, these are just strategies that you can focus on the local level. I'll pass it back to Eric.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if every one of these protests had a big sign saying 10 demands for justice. Just be clear about it. And when they say, you're saying defund the police, what do you mean by defund the police? You just say 10 demands for justice.
And you can't co-op it either.
Right.
And you see the squad, they tried the best to co-op the protest and the movement. And I talk about it with CJ and JB. You had people in the media that was misleading people, saying that the squad and progressive politicians support defund the police, even though the voting record could not. It shows the exact opposite. So they show up at the rallies, they score political points by just say, "Hey, I'm here and I'm showing solidarity with you." But if you have a list of demands, like, okay, do you support these demands? And that was Cori Bush. She was called out because she was trying to get points for showing up at the Medicare for All march, but she didn't realize that the Medicare for All march actually had demands. The demand of the Medicare for All march was for Joe Biden to use the executive authority to give anyone Medicaid in the middle of a pandemic. So then when she was asked if she support that, she did not.
Mm-hmm.
She did not. And then activists called her out for that. And so when you see the difference between having a movement that's based on demand versus having a free flow movement that can easily be hijacked by the managerial class, that happened to Black Lives Matter. That's exactly what happened to them.
Agreed.
A lot of people don't know. Black Lives Matter, there are a lot of real activists. I'm in Missouri, guys. All the real activists that started Black Lives Matter under Barack Obama and Ferguson, a lot of those motherfuckers was killed. We covered that on our show. The unbelievable amount of Ferguson activists that was found dead shortly afterwards. That what happens to the real. So Black Lives Matter, they have some real activists. So the one who flown around that's prodded by the Democratic Party, just know they're there for a reason. They got rid of the real ones.
Right.
Agreed.
So into number 4, implement a minimum standard of living. And again, I'm trying to go like a step further. So when we're talking about a minimum wage, it should be even more than a minimum wage. It should be a minimum just life. So there's increasing the minimum wage. One potential idea I thought of is you could link the minimum wage to the wages of the top 1%. And look at how those have risen. That should be what how the minimum wage is raising. You get housing. Everybody should have housing. It gets into trying to decommodify the basic needs. But you can be doing things, even in the short term, just in terms of pumping federal money into housing, and of course, housing first programs, I think are great. And the same thing with food is, food should be free. I mean, everybody should be able to eat. I mean, imagine if we just had just food pantries that are just funded with federal dollars where people can just go and get food, period. You got jobs, of course, are a big thing. Federal job guarantee, leveraging, federal dollars, which, we know with the MMT theory is there's no shortage of federal dollars. It's there. It's a matter of what we're spending it on. We can be spending it on jobs. And then other things into kind of these standard things of mandating paid parental leave and eliminating student loan debt. Trying to hit on those things.
I want to chime in here because I actually like the idea of ending hunger.
Yeah.
Because that's actually not discussed enough, actually, when you think about it. I don't talk about it enough. Like that as a demand. Because if you think about it, like think about the Medicare for all, right? We just took Medicare and we expanded it. Like you can actually start a program like, all right, just take the free school lunch programs and expand it to everybody, right? We got the resources. That's a good.
Yeah.
I like that. I actually like that as like, yo, let's end hunger. We could do it. Like you guys think we can't?
The only reason why we think that, oh, like if we start giving food to everybody, then there won't be enough is because we've been indoctrinated into thinking that that's what would happen when that's not true. That's just an idea, an assumption that's been ingrained in our heads ever since we were born, pretty much. There's propaganda all over the place, and schools are indoctrination factories. But there are these forces that are controlling this narrative in our schools and our media and everywhere that are going to prevent this from happening. So, I mean, we can talk about that later, about how we have to do something about these forces or at least acknowledge them.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Mad Ocelot God 81 for the super chat. Time banks plus tool/equipment libraries equal alt economy. Start to eliminate the use of money. Starve the beast. Thank you so much.
But yeah, not giving people food is pretty much killing them. Just like not giving people health care or, these basic needs is killing them.
So we just covered this on the International Leftist Coalition, but in China, when they had their lockdowns, they had a lot of workers that was passing out food to people while they was locked down. So my plan is like, we can easily afford to do that even without the lockdown. You guys know what I mean? Like, why not have a system where you just pass out food to people just cause? Once again, if you think we can't afford it, I think you're silly. Because I think we can. Like, I just look at those examples. Like, all right, I'm just looking at this, what they did in China. We don't need a lockdown pretense, and let's just expand it. Like, that's a good idea to just have as a program.
But remember, Nick, we got to make sure that food doesn't come from the corporations. Like, we got to make sure that we're not giving these corporations more power. So it's important for us to like grow our own food and all that, and for us to have control on that.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I think if we actually having a very comprehensive left movement, like we would include that part of that, right? Like we would have this whole segment. Like, all right, let's build community, let's build our own food, let's have resources that come to do that, and then when we had a food drive, then we incorporate that. But that is a very important point.
Food should be free.
Yeah.
All right, number 5, end the wars, cut military spending. Reduce military budget by at least 20% every year. And 20% is just a number that I pulled out. I mean, there's almost, of course, the more the better as far as, reducing military spending. It's mind-bogglingly ridiculous. Then in terms of, the military is our jobs programs right now. So, you're going to need a replacement jobs program. And so, you should be looking at green jobs, federal jobs, some kind of jobs programs to, as part of it, so that they can't be saying to you, what are you going to do with all these out of work soldiers? reform imperialist policies. Of course, it gets into our whole ridiculous foreign policy, and there's a huge chunk there of stuff to talk about. And then reign in a national security state, which is of course a big part of how they operate. And I think any left candidate or person representative that we can get behind, really has to be acknowledging that and talking about that, and it's going to have to be dealt with. But of course, not easy. Number 6, immigration reform. Abolish ICE. It seemed to be pretty low-hanging fruit, but there you go. And provide a path to citizenship for everyone. Basically, if you're in the country, you should be a citizen. You should be able to get there without a lot of nonsense. All right, so that's the first half of the list that kind of is more about policies. Then the second half is really trying to get more into actualizing about systemic changes. And the big thing to me is you got to focus on the money. Big money runs everything in Washington, and we know this, and yet it seems like a lot of people on the left will have whole discussions about what's wrong and what's happening and what's to be done and whatnot, and not talk about the money. And I just think it's got to be the focus. As I have here, it's the systemic issue that drives all other issues. Nothing will fundamentally change until we deal with it. So how do we deal with it? Well, at the state and local level, you can enact ballot measures for clean elections and for public financing. And not only, can this happen, this has happened in the state here where Sabrina or I are, where we are here in Massachusetts. In 1998, there was a ballot measure called Clean Elections, and it passed by an overwhelming margin. It provided a pool of public financing for candidates for the state level candidates right up to governor. Robert Reich ran for governor using public funds in 2002 in Massachusetts, using this system. Now then what happened is then after that, in 2003, all kinds of nonsense started happening with state legislature and the funding, and lo and behold, they abolished it, and it disappeared. And this should have been a huge scandal, but it wasn't. But the point is, it's possible. It has happened. It can happen. So ballot measures have real potential. They could be huge. At the federal level, and I know whenever this comes up, there's all kinds of naysaying, but I think you really have to get serious about talking about a constitutional amendment to deal with big money in politics and government. So there's the Move to Amend movement out there, and it's not going to be easy, but nothing we're doing or proposing here is easy, but it's the type of thing that we're probably going to have to get out in the streets for, to be protesting over. In terms of what an amendment like that, well, in terms of the reason you need it, because currently, if you pass a campaign finance law at the federal level or at the state level, it gets into the courts, it gets into appeals, and it ends up at the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court comes out and says, oh, well, corporations are people, money is speech, and they strike these laws down. And so, at least as far as I can tell, that the fix is going to have to happen at that level. But it doesn't have to be a complicated fix. If you look at the text of the We the People amendment that Move to Amend is talking about itself, it's like it's this is the whole amendment. I try to make it a little larger. Like the whole thing fits on a page. Artificial entities such as corporations do not have constitutional rights. The rights from the Constitution are the rights of natural persons only. Artificial entities can be regulated. Privileges shall be determined by the people. Section 2, money is not free speech. The government shall have the ability to limit free speech. And federal state shall require contributions shall be publicly disclosed. The judiciary shall not construe the spending of money to be speech under the First Amendment, and this shouldn't be used to abridge freedom of the press. So, it's not easy, but I think it needs a constitutional fix. Next point is investigate and prosecute corruption at all levels. On Sabby's show last night, Dr. Kaboo mentioned the Cora investigation. This was an investigation in Congress that really got into corruption, and it needs to be investigated. It needs to be prosecuted, and demand radical transparency for all representatives and agencies. Should be a no-brainer, but they're working for us. We should be able to see what they're doing. Number 8 is election reform. If you're going to have elections, you need to be able to believe in the elections and the machines. Make all voting machines open and software be open source and auditable. Implement ranked choice voting. Open up ballot access. You shouldn't even have to be a member of a party to be on the ballot. Then you can also enact the national popular vote system to fix the electoral college. There's actually a scheme where you don't even need Congress. You can actually pass the national popular vote through each state legislature, and the electoral college is gone. Then, kind of talking about money, is reform taxation and funding. I think we should be demanding to abolish all the taxes except for the highly progressive income tax, wealth taxes, taxes on large corporations. You could simplify the whole thing, make it fairer, and have taxes do what they really should be doing, which should be addressing wealth inequality. Taxes are about wealth distribution. They're not about funding programs. You also need to abolish the loopholes as part of this. So you'd be talking about a major, tax reform, but a tax simplification. Prosecute and potentially expel persons and corporations that abuse the offshore tax havens and the loopholes. If the billionaires don't like the new tax system, they can leave. We don't need them. And another thing that this gets into is when you're going at the state and local governments, they are run on tax dollars. There is that direct linkage. But I would submit that there doesn't have to be that direct linkage. You could fund state and local governments with federal dollars on a per person basis and just have that be the funding scheme. And you get rid of this whole concept of, we have to raise more property taxes to pay for schools. It's ridiculous, and it's fixable. Number 10, democratize the enterprise. Gets into kind of the concept of the worker co-ops. Provide federal funds and incentives for employee-owned and controlled businesses. Even like the next one, like mandate all publicly traded companies have board seats for employee representation. I mean, that one's even like a lower hanging fruit, kind of a shorter term fix. Like I think they have that in Germany, where the large corporations, have to have board seats that represent the workers. Break up monopolies and large corporations. I mean, I think we should just pick a size. $20 billion or something. You know, if your corporation's larger than that, then it can't exist. It has to be broken up. I mean, convert companies providing essential services to employee-controlled utilities. You take something like a YouTube. It should be a utility, and you know, and not even have it government controlled, but employee controlled. Have a corporate system of governance that's based on democracy. You know, democracy of the employees. And last on the list, protect freedom of speech from censorship, whether from government or corporations, which, you know, of course, we're seeing increasing amounts of censorship. So that's a list that I came up with.
Okay. I'm going to remove this for a second. Thoughts? I'm opening it up to the panel.
So there's a lot to say on that. I was willing to let him finish and go through it. And then we can discuss ideas and what a lot of those actually means. And I've been exploring other forms of corruption recently, especially over this last year. And the reason why I've done this is to answer the question, why have Bernie Sanders and the squad been so disappointing to me? Especially as someone who quit my job, I was canvassing. I was a believer in the idea of taking over the Democratic Party. So when I saw the weakness out of them, I was like, how does this happen? Even though you guys don't take corporate money, well, PAC money, you know, the thing they always go through. They actually do take. There actually is some shady stuff they do, but the talking point they go with, they don't take no corporate PAC money. Let's run with that. So why do they do the bidding of Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party? How do the Democratic Party allow this soft corruption to happen? Now, these people are human. These people get comfortable. Like once you not only have $165,000 a year, I don't know the exact amount, but that, and not even just the salary. People look at the salary, but it's the lifestyle, the taxpayer benefits you get, the free vacations. You got a security detail. You got people waiting at your every beck and call. So and this is the miscalculation I made before. I thought if you just get rid of corporate cash, you can get someone who fight against the system. But even if you don't take corporate cash, that's only one very small piece of the puzzle. Now I'm talking about progressive corruption, but we can get into even more what I call like direct corruption that they can work their way around. So how do the military industrial complex get everything they want? Through politics, right? How do they get the media to report on all the wars and take pro-war stances? It's because obviously the weapon defense contractors, they pay the cable company and the media, and then they take the side of the defense contractors, and then they donate to the politicians, and then they allow the politicians to implement pro-war stances. And then even if you take that money out, if you're a politician and you retire, a lot of these people they take jobs in the weapon defense contracting industry. They take jobs in the media. So how do you stop that as well? Because that's another form of corruption. That even if you let's ban all the money, the fact that you know that you can get a job in the intelligence community and in media and weapon defense contractors, that's another form that make people like, oh shit, I gotta do their bidding. Heidi Heitkamp is a great example. Famous neoliberal. Now she's a lobbyist. She's one of the lobbyists that are fighting against the Build Back Better. How funny is that? So you see, even if they lose their elections like they do, they always have that incentive to do the bidding of the corporations because they're always a job. So do you ban them for getting, like after you become a politician, are you banned for getting jobs forever? I don't know. I'm asking. Like, is that reasonable?
Right. That's that revolving door, right? That
Yeah.
public-private partnership where they can have a seat in Congress, but then they can become lobbyists or then work for the FDA and then work for Pfizer or some other corporation. So I think at the top of the list should be the root of the problem of all this, and that is that public-private partnership that we're living in, which is synonymous with a fascist country, right? The definition of fascism is the state and the corporations or the private sector empowering each other, right? So I think that should be at the top of the list Otherwise, like what everything else that's listed there, I think we would only be garnering people that already agree with us, because we also want to garner support from other people who feel like they are being oppressed, right? So yeah, I think that should be at the top of the list. Corruption, and also we should acknowledge who are we entrusting to implement the changes that we want. Like, are we entrusting corrupted people to try to change the corrupt system?
I think one way that you can tell whether or not a candidate is going to actually fight on these things. I think you can tell by whether or not they're calling out current representatives, current Democrats as corrupt. Like, Bernie never really said that. He kind of said that at early in the campaign.
He
But,
used to he used to
you know,
pretend he got me because he used to say
yeah,
we're gonna challenge the Democratic Party establishment, and he tricked me because I was like, hell yeah, I'm down for that.
Yes,
Right? But
virtue
then
signaling.
he
you know,
didn't.
when Nina Turner was running, I mean, I never bought into it because she never called them out. I mean, did you ever hear Nina Turner say Nancy Pelosi is corrupt?
Yeah, that's why the red flags when she ran, because the story is that Nina was one of the voices on the campaign that was telling Bernie Sanders to go harder on Biden. Once again, these are the stories that we come out that like come from leaks, so we got to take them at face value or whatever. So the question is, how you go from advising Bernie to go hard on the Democrats, and then you run, and all of a sudden you take a Hillary Clinton style approach, right? Well, I won't say Hillary Clinton style. I think that's a bad example. Maybe I'll say Elizabeth Warren, like more of a hands off. Like I'm not going to be a mean to the neoliberal approach. Like that's completely like that contradicted everything you used to say. So those are red flags. That even like unapologetic, like he flagged those in the op-ed he actually wrote. I think that was a great paper,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things, right? But frankly, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, which politicians are going to listen to us, and why are we entrusting this corrupted election system to fix this election system, right? We don't even know if our votes count.
Hmm.
And
Well,
when Franco
I
said
mean, what's the
earlier,
alternative plan? I guess is any path that we're trying to do here is going to be hard. It's going to be, what I'm proposing is that if we get a set of hard demands that we get behind, and that if we start rallying people, and I think there's a large swath of people out there that are just looking for something. They're disgusted with what they see. They gave Bernie a shot, and a lot of them came out for that. But you're going to have to give them something. I think part of the reason why the left isn't growing, I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but part of the reason why is I feel like the left isn't giving people a path. They're not giving people.
yeah, I think
But
the professional boutique left is not giving people the path, and this is why we're trying to find another alternative. Because I told a story about people who that I'm around that I know in my life that are apolitical, but when I talk about building community, they're like, yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Like they don't buy the two-party bullshit. It's just a lot of people they don't even think about other alternatives, and I think once we educate people, we can start working towards that path. And I want to pass it back to Franco, but he did say something earlier on the stream that people may find a stream, but I think it's true because he said you're not really gonna have any real change unless you destroy DC or something
yeah,
until that line.
abolish
Yeah,
DC
but
needs to be abolished.
I think
But also with these demands,
What
though,
does
like
that
if we
mean?
have a large number of people, hypothetically, why would these corrupted people that take orders from these private institutions and vice versa, why would they listen to us? If they could pass a bill uh, that invests or to speed up the process for more automation to replace us. So why would they listen to us?
the reason why I
I
say
just
I'm
that
not.
is
want,
Okay, can I just?
I,
I'm not suggesting we co-opt them or get them to come to our side. I'm suggesting that we replace them.
Okay.
yeah,
so I just want to
a lot.
add that in reference to the left, like not growing, from what I've seen from, I would say Gen Z, I'll start with that generation. They are actually moving further left. And what I mean by that is they are less likely to buy into the two party system. And I work with this group. Most of my students have been Gen Z. They're less likely to buy into the two-party system. They're more likely to embrace socialism, and part of that has to do with student loan debt. We can do a whole separate discussion about that. And being housing insecure, because housing is ridiculous, and they see that they're not going to be able to buy houses maybe within their 20s, 30s, who knows, in their lifetime. So they're more
Yeah.
likely to embrace that. And I think that's part of the problem, is that I think that some of us are still looking at this through the lens of like the Bernie left, right? When there's a whole other side of people that have moved further left than that, they're not buying it anymore. And I think we need to hear more from those people, from those groups. And I noticed that when I did that Gen Z panel, the way of thinking is different. I think most of us like on this panel are like I know me and Nick are, that way. But I think when Nick talks about like the boutique left, they are not that far left. And they're the ones a lot of times that have the larger platforms, they have larger audiences, and they're not hearing from there's a whole side of
Yeah.
people that have moved way past Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. It's also their growth is synthetic because they get favored by the algorithm. Meanwhile, our voices get suppressed by these oligarchs that are afraid of us. But yeah, Glory's in the chat. Shout out to her. And yeah, these Zoomers have gone through 2 recessions already. There's going to be a lot of apolitical people that understand that there's something very wrong with this country. And I don't think that these Bernie type of messages that these boutique leftists are delivering is going to garner their support. I think a more non-tribal message is going to help them help garner support from them.
That's such a good point. I'm glad that you brought that up, Sabi, because this is actually a problem I've seen for a while, and I purposely talk about the boutique left and bring them up, and I make the difference between us, and I do it actively because that's the goal. Like I want to let you guys know these people are not our allies, and they have a role to play. So you guys know I agree with a lot of what Chris Hedges to say, but he has said something recently that I strongly disagree with. Chris Hedges recently was talking about how he said there's no populist left, and then he implied that there was a populist right, and I debunked that talking point a long time ago. But do you see the mistake that Hedges is making? And this is a guy that I gave a lot of props to. You gotta watch my show, but the mistake he is making that he paints the left as the TYT left. Like he look at the AOC, he look at Bernie Sanders, he says that's the left and that's the only left. And the reason why this is actually pretty problematic is because this is activist erasure that we have actually seen everyone in the Washington establishment is complicit with. So Sabby, prop to her, props to Garland Nixon. To Garland Nixon actually had a debate with me regarding defund the police. Because I actually one of the fucking co-founders of 10 Demands, right?
Yeah.
So when you see people talk about when you see people talk about police abolition and defund the police, what part of the formula do you guys always notice is missing in that? It would be some liberal talking to some black liberal, talking to some conservative, talking about how defund the police is not like how activists don't actually support that. They always leave out like the actual people on the ground, like the people that actually marching in the streets, right? Like I was at the George Floyd protest. I'm talking to like the young black people who are like the boutique left could not win these people over. Like these people are done with the system, and we covered this yesterday, Savvy. How there's a divide among the activists, black activists that we noticed. Remember the people who were protesting Biden's speech for voting rights or whatever.
Yep.
And then there were some activists who said, and who were like, yeah, we're done with the Democrats. And then meanwhile, you had NAACP leadership. They said, oh no, we're not necessarily saying that we're done voting for Democrats. What? You guys see the divide
Yep.
between the professional activist class versus the people on the ground? And the problem is the people on the ground are often silenced. So that's why I had a problem with what Chris had just said. Because there is a populist left. This is the anti-mandate left, the real like anti-national security state left. We are the people who are banned on social media. We are the people who are not given a platform, period.
Yeah.
But this is why I think it's important to this is why I think it's important to talk to people outside of your circle, outside of your, realm of political beliefs. And this is very important because if you only like talk to people who pretty much say the same thing that you do, or they're on the right, then yeah, to you, like those people may not be out there. But you have to like this is where the research comes in, right? Because obviously, like we don't none of us have large channels, right? It is hard to find us. It is very hard. And that's why I tell people make sure you share, not so much for the views, but for the message to get across. And the reality is, if you meet activists out on the streets protesting like against the police, protesting whatever, the more radical ones, the ones who will get on there and say, yeah, screw the two-party system, Democrats are trash too. Those people that they interview, those interviews will not be put in the final segment that you see on the news that night. I know because I interned at a news station when I was an undergrad, and they used to
Oh
do that to
man.
me. They used to cut out pieces that they didn't want the public to hear. So you
That's
think you're
all I
getting a
know when I
real
was
The
on
good,
the stuff
CNN.
that'll make their donors
yeah,
upset.
When,
yeah,
when I was on CNN, I talked to this guy on CNN when I was on the canvassing trail in South Carolina, and I talked to I forgot his name, Ryan Nobles. That I think that's the CNN guy, and I talked to this guy for 20 minutes on camera, and then they cut it to like 10 seconds because I remember I went on this whole spill when it was like Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. I'm like, bro, Joe Biden is more racist than Donald Trump. He wrote the crime bill. I went to the whole spill. I just seen Ryan Nobles like, there's no way we airing this shit. And I was watching it. I could not wait till the segment released. It came out, and then they just cut it to some bullshit.
So Eric said something interesting earlier. He said that you're saying that these demands are. I just want some clarity. These demands are for when we replace the current politicians who are there right now.
What? Well, first is, it's all a discussion. At this point, is trying to see what we can possibly reach a consensus on. What would the demands be and how would we use them? But what I would propose is that any representative, any candidate that does not support the demands, that's not on board, we don't support them. The answer is a no, a hard no. And that means, no support, no money, no praise. It's basically either you're on board with this or you're on the wrong side. You're on the other side, and it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat or Green or Independent. It's about having the right policies and the right beliefs, and they're also, they need to be willing to call out, even the popular supposed lefty Democrats as what they are, corrupt. We need to start using the C word.
So we're entrusting these politicians to get elected in this current corrupted election system that we have. It's privately owned. We don't know if our votes count.
Well, again, it's not a straightforward, easy path. And if there's a more practical, easier path, I'm all ears.
Yeah, because I think
if there's another list.
I think
let's see the list.
I think that's too much energy that's going to be put on politicians that may break our hearts again, like how we saw in 2018 and again in 2020 with a new set of squad members. Like we entrusted them in actually turning DC upside down, and they just joined the party, joined the oppression party. So
Well,
I just don't think that there's enough time to wait for enough politicians to be in this corrupted system when they could themselves become corrupted once they get in. I think more focus should be on community organizing.
I think that part of the problem is if you look back like at the squad or like Justice Democrats in general, I feel like they weren't vetted. And if you look back on it, like if you knew who AOC really was, like if you knew her real background back then, would so many people have gone out and canvassed for her? Probably not. So I think it's important to vet people. And I think that, there are some people, like, especially like within our audience, that still do want to try electoral politics. And if that's what they want to do, I do think like Case Study QB came up with the People's Gauntlet that he's working on. I think that I think that what Eric's saying, like with the list of demands, there needs to be some type of, if you are going to go out and vote for them, there needs to be some type of list of demands. They need to sign off on something. They need to be vetted. These people were not vetted. And it's just, and then I was watching the thing last night with Brianna Joy Gray and Chris Hedges and Shama Sawant. And
I
at one
gotta
point it got a
watch
little
that.
heated. Yeah. At one point it got a little heated. And there's a lot of disappointment, right? With, electoral politics. People were upset with Joe Biden, but we knew how he was going to be anyway. But I think we have to ask ourselves, but why are people disappointed? But why are people saying they're done with electoral politics? It's because, at least on the left, it's because the squad did not do what they said they were going to do. And I don't think we expected them to be perfect. I don't think we expected them to get everything right, but to see them just go along with the establishment, again, what was the point? What was the point of going out there canvassing all those hours, knocking on all
Right.
those doors? Like, what
And
was the point?
and even if these politicians get in, like these progressive or outsider candidates that we're talking about get in, they're going to have to work with with the legislation that's introduced into Congress, which is all written by lobbyists. So, and anything that they try to introduce is not going to be supported by anybody there in DC. So, if hypothetically there were this outsider candidate that wins by some miracle in this corrupted election system, what they'd have to do is just expose everything in DC. Just call everybody out, turn DC upside down, even if you're that one person that's going to be a one-term candidate. But again, that's just the process of informing the masses of the corruption of our country and how this path of electoral politics is not a path that's going to save us.
I want to shout out these super chats really quick from Cryptician. Thanks so much for the super chat. We need more Ralph Naders and Jill Steins and Shama Sawants and Princess Blandings. Where are they all at? And thanks so much for this one too. Progressives need to declare political war against liberals and conservatives. We need to fight back harder than they fight us and knock them down. Thank you so much.
I mean, I would suggest we do it all. It's going to take really everything. And when we're talking about a general strike, if that's the type of thing it's going to take is masses of people out in the streets, masses of people protesting in front of Congress and legislatures, and demanding these things. And no, it's not going to be electing one or two politicians and getting them in and hoping they do the right thing. I mean, the other thing I'd say about the squad is you could kind of tell really from the beginning that they weren't really going to fight the power, because they never really called people out. I mean, I never heard anybody in the squad even before they were elected say Nancy Pelosi is corrupt, the Democratic Party is corrupt. Big money runs everything. We have to get the money out. I mean, they would sort of hint at it, but to me, that's how you know. I mean, we need, the step one is calling them out, and of course step one is Dem exit, of course, too. I mean, that party's going nowhere.
Yeah, they showed their hands early, because I I remember AOC when she first got in. I remember she was live streaming like the orientation, and then she was like, "Yo, I'm gonna expose what the lobbyist was telling me." She ain't doing that shit no more. She ain't doing that shit anymore. So this is the thing. This is the United States left needs much more revolutionary discipline. So I'm one of the people, especially when you look at what we fighting right now, the U.S. empire and its allies, NATO, combined with the U.K., Israel, Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about the entire kabang. I'm challenging you guys to name one time a worker class movement have ever challenged anything like this before. Like this is.
Anytime a working class movement has challenged NATO and these.
I'm talking about like when have a working class movement, disenfranchised communities ever had the kind of challenge that we have right now, going against the entire U.S. empire connected with the entire corporate America as well. So my point is that we need much more revolutionary discipline. So when we see people spend a ton of time investing in the Justice Democrats, which is a top-down organization, that's why we're in such a bad position. We talk about the benefits of mutual aid and the benefits of horizontal based movements. This is tied to why you need demands as well. And I'm gonna tie all this together. So if you have a list of demands, and this is what the Justice Democrats do, you have a list of demands, you put it to the politicians. Hey, do you support the Medicare for All march? Because we calling out Joe Biden because he can actually expand Medicare for All using executive authority. Do you support this? Their answer to that was effectively no. So when you get that answer, you should immediately be done investing in that movement, because that shows they have a top-down approach, meaning the people on the top, the people with the established power, they decide the direction of the movement. We cannot have that. So in a horizontal approach, when you bring that demand to that person, they're like, okay, I'm interested in this. This is something I can support. This is something I can show up to. If I have complaints about it, I can help you make it better. That will be the response of someone you want to build a movement with. Now, the reason why people on the left give up on electoral politics, because where does this exist in Washington? It doesn't exist. So I tell you guys all the time, I don't really care that much about electoral politics, but I'll always give you guys that 15% number, because everyone has that number. Like if you ask Ron what his percent, how much you think you should invest in electoral politics, I think Ron would say maybe 1 or 5%. Right? Now, the reason why I say 15%, because I can easily see us. I think the route toward change is having a horizontal movement that is built upon labor and class struggle, right? And you can also use third parties as an apparatus to build and springboard that. So you can have third parties that run, instead of having campaigns, you running to build a working class movement, not to win within a rigged system. You don't care about the polls, you don't care about none of that. You run your elections to build a working class movement. You get demand from different disenfranchised communities, and you build a localized movement that can grow nationally. So once again, these are things that can't be accomplished within the 2 years, guise of electoral politics. But these are the movement building strategies that we need to start looking into. Now, I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts on that. That was just kind of why I cooked based on the conversation thus far. So to wrap it up in a nutshell, if you ask me what I support, that's the number one litmus test. Is it up, down, or horizontal? So Sawant is someone I can support, because based on what I see a horizontal structure there, where she's trying to build a working class movement on top of her engagement in electoral politics. So I'm like, I like that. I don't see anything wrong with that, right? What I see wrong is the top-down approach that the progressives support, where follow me, I'm the leader. Justice Democrats the leader. If they don't support something, they don't support it. So they didn't support the Medicare for All march because their leader didn't support it. They didn't support Voice the Vote because their leader didn't support it. Do you guys see the difference there?
And their leader is who? Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah, so I acknowledge I am to the right of some people on this, because Ron straight up like fuck electoral politics straight up, and I know his argument. And I acknowledge the argument of people who say that. But the only thing I say, I think we can have smart horizontal movements that is built on labor. So that's why I don't discount it altogether. I just think that the electoral politics options we have is a joke. That's why when I say fuck electoral politics, I'm talking about like the options we have now, right? But I want to give you guys thoughts on that.
Yeah, aside from like protests and all that, like we can come back to that later about general strikes and everything. Some things that need to be considered. Definitely more discussions should be had about contingencies, right? What if people lose their jobs, like their jobs fire them because they were not showing up to work because they wanted to go to the general strike or things like that, right? We gotta organize in a way in which people can have money to fall back on if they do get fired and they lose healthcare, etc. So there has to be something parallel happening, parallel societies or parallel governments, where we have our own system in our own local areas that our state may not recognize, but we don't care because we have enough people to create this parallel government in which we vote. We know for sure our votes count, but in order to do that, the first thing that we got to do is inform people about the problems with our election system, the problems in our country, the corruption, who's really controlling everything. So that's why primarily informing people is the most important thing. But I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you guys think about like parallel local governments and parallel local societies, parallel economies, etc.?
I just want to shout these out really quick. Thanks so much, Cryosynth. You don't need politicians to back any of this. These are our demands. Despite who is holding or running for office, we force the vote. We have summits. We evolve. Thank you so much for that. And Cryptician, thanks so much. Progressives are treated same white people used to treat black people and Native Americans, like we are worthless, don't deserve rights, and should be spit on. Thank you so much for that. And Valerie has a point here. So how do we get the money out? We can't even wake the libs up, let alone get them to join leftists. I need to know realistic answers. I can answer that one really quick. One of the things that Paula Jean Swearigan said was her advice was, if you're going to donate to a candidate, not to donate to the organization, donate directly to that candidate. Because as we saw with Justice Democrats, and I believe Robbie from MCSE was the one that reported this, they had corrupt money too. Justice Democrats had corrupt money. So that's the thing about donating to the organization versus donating to that individual person. I think that's a big difference. The other thing too that I would say is, in reference to the money, one of the things that Marcus talks about this a lot, the first thing you have to do is you have to make people aware. And yes, there are some of us on the left like talking about this, but to be honest with you, they're very few. I'm just going to be real. There's very few. We have to continue to make more and more people aware of the money. Most people I talk to don't even know. They don't know about it. They don't know that Sally Mae / Navient donates to Democrats and Republicans. They're one of the most predatory student loan companies in the United States. They don't know that. They don't know there's a website called Open Secrets where you can follow the money for each politician. Most people don't know. And so you have to start first by creating awareness and educate people. You get enough people to know, you get enough people riled up, and then you have more people to join your movement. Bernie Sanders could have done the same movement without doing it through a campaign. Imagine if Dr. King was like, yeah, man, I'm going to do a civil rights movement while I run for president, or while I run for Congress, or while I run for Senate. No,
right. But Bernie stopped, right? He told us that corporations buy off our politicians, but then he didn't continue with that and go outside of electoral politics and continue informing people. Right? He could have done what we do, like with our shows, or have, I don't know, some kind of organization or something that helps spread the message of all these things that our government and our corporations don't want the public to know. But it's up to us to keep figuring this stuff out. You know, we are getting deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. But yeah, definitely informing people, like I was mentioning earlier, and how Sabby was saying right now, making more people aware. That's the most important step, so we can come to the best solutions, whether it be these parallel governments or parallel societies, parallel economics, whatever. We got to understand how our enemy is operating, how they're evolving to oppress us in the future. What are they going to do in the future to try to oppress us? They are moving more towards automation and all that. So yeah, definitely informing. That's what I say at the end of all my shows. Stay informed. You're not alone, and I know you'll stay informed.
Yeah, I mean, informing people, calling things out, calling out what our government's doing, what the politicians are doing, the corruption. Yeah, that's huge. That's critical. That's step one. But I'm also saying, we need to be pivoting to step two, because I mean, I'll see it in the chats. Okay, I agree with you with everything you're saying. Now what do we do about it? What do we?
They just want a sexy answer. I talked to you guys about this before, because
sexy
I know
answers
the
can
stuff
be
we
good.
talk about can be depressing, and then people are like, "What the answer?" I'm like, I told you, organized general strikes, build community, mutual aid. That's not a sexy answer. Like, you guys are used to the sexy answer. Like, all right, what you do? Oh, all you gotta do is donate to rebel headquarters. We vote for AOC, and then we got a solution. It's not that the answer is not as sexy as you guys want it to be.
Right, but also keep learning how the enemy is evolving to oppress you. Yeah. Right, because you could come to a certain solution, but if it's limited, right? If you stop without knowing what else the enemy is doing to try to oppress you, is that the best solution, or has the enemy already anticipated that solution and they could co-opt it, like how they co-opted Justice Democrats, or how they probably have co-opted third parties, and that's why they're so unsuccessful now.
I mean, I think the other thing I'd say is these proposed solutions or actions, don't have to be mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. The idea of parallel societies and governments, I think it's a good thing to try. I think it's going to kind of apply and work for a minority, of the population. I think most people are not going to be ready for that, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think, we we shouldn't get too caught up in, this is the only plan,
Right.
or that one's the only plan.
So that's why
Personally,
that's why the focus right now, step one, should be to keep informing more and more people. Talk to people in your community. Share videos from, I don't know, Revolutionary Blackout, MCSC Network, Gray Zone, Last American Vagabond. Keep sharing these sources out to people and help them wake up.
Why
yeah,
why
no,
why do you guys
definitely.
think why do you guys think we had a General Strike Summit? Now we about to have an International Solidarity Summit that's coming in March, and then we're gonna have General Strike Summit too. And there's the boutique left that we talk about. They actively push towards anti-intellectualism. I see it like Franco is advocating exactly what we've been saying on the show. Like Fred Hampton himself said, you're not going to have a successful revolution without education. I see a lot of weakness. I see a lot of intellectual inconsistency on the left. So we got to correct that. Meanwhile, a lot of the people who are purposely leading us off a cliff, the criticism of the Jones Strike Summit was, why are you guys doing this? What's the point again around talking about labor and how you build working class movements? What's the point? That was the crux of the criticism. That on top of the lie that we didn't have union organizers, but we all know that was a lie.
And
But
even if you guys didn't have everything figured out in the General Strike Summit, that was the whole point of it. And so
right,
that people can come in and talk to you guys about what is the best strategy, including people in the chat or whatever. At least the conversation is starting, and you guys can acknowledge where, okay, we thought this could have worked, but maybe not, considering all this new information I just learned. That was the whole point. But they don't even want to start there. They just want to keep living in this insane mentality of doing the same thing over and over, trying to get more and more progressives elected, as if that's ever worked before.
and that's why we go. That's why we go over. And I covered the CIA left infiltration tactics, where and I always say this disclaimer because I think it's important. I'm not saying you're CIA because I'm not trying to create a McCarthyism here. I'm saying if you're following the CIA tactics, what does that say about your politics? So what they say the best way to disrupt left movements is to redirect everything to committees and advocate caution at all costs, right? And that was what they did to the Jones Strike Summit. And to shut down the discussion on labor, they were saying, "Oh, you can't have the discussions unless you're a labor leader. Who are you guys? What are your credentials? You guys see how they use classism and rank to try to shut down conversations between people they deem to be lesser than them? That's a CIA tactic that I've seen people use on us in real time. And when you know and you prepare for this stuff, it's really trippy when you see it in action.
Yeah.
And that's why there are a ton of people when I report on this who had no idea about the infiltration tactics. When I shared it and when I did my segment on it, there were a lot of people who reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, Nick, everything over the last year makes sense now. Forced to vote, the opposition to March for Medicare for All. When I look at this list, everything makes sense. That's why we have these conversations because now people are prepared because now they got information they didn't have before,
Right, and
right?
that's understanding how the enemy is operating.
Exactly, exactly.
So, so I agree with all of that. The thing that I would urge bringing in is to focus more on the money, because it always comes down, to the money. Big money runs everything. And I feel like too often the discussion, doesn't come around to that and doesn't focus on that. And if you're focusing on the money, and then it's like, what are we going to do, about the money, about its influence?
See, I was
The,
making this point
Um,
earlier. I didn't get a chance to finish the point, but I was making the point earlier talking about other forms of corruption. Then we steered the conversation. But and to be clear, when I look at all those lists of demands, I like them, right? Now, but we talking about solutions. It's one thing just to have a list, right? So when we talk about like money is one form, but the reason why I endorse Franco's idea of saying, all right, we got to take on the whole DC establishment because that doesn't stop the influence of the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex. I explained earlier how they can control the politicians and corrupt them with the prospects of getting them jobs as well. So even if you change the election system, like let's change you change the election system, that still doesn't change like the conflicts of interest that will make capital fight against the movement. And also, even as someone who advocate for a general strike, I always do it. I also acknowledge that the capitalist class, they already have all the capital. So the point of a general strike is to starve out the capitalist class. So we got to also prepare for the possibility for the capitalist class willing to throw this country in the garbage, because they can
Yep.
say, "I'm willing to let the country tank because we already got the capital."
Yep.
Right?
And if I may, if when we're talking
Right.
about the enemy, that's where we're talking about the money, right? Our enemy is the one that has the money and the influence. That's why understanding how they're operating, that's understanding how they're using the money to oppress us, whether it be co-option, infiltration, etc., all that.
When we're talking about that elite, corporate capitalist class, I agree. They're completely sociopathic. They'll do anything to have a better quarter. They kill children to have a better quarter. But the other thing they are that occurred to me is they're also uber competitive in that they will cut each other's throat, without a second thought. And one of the things that I'm thinking is that we should be thinking about how to use that against them. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think they haven't been able to take over completely and just become, Jeff Bezos running everything. Because as big as Bezos is, I mean, he has competitors.
I think we already have that, though. I think they already are running everything. And there are people more powerful than Bezos, Elon Musk, and Zuckerberg. They just stay out of the limelight. And they've been in power for a long time.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Marcus and I did a whole stream about this, about where the money is concentrated, where it comes from, how people need to be focusing more on the banks, JP Morgan, how those levels are above the United States president. So we talk about the money and we talk about the class issue a lot. Like I bring up the class issue often. And I think what we need to start doing is instead of trying to like unite people based on left versus right, we need to unite based on the class issue. And this is something that Bernie Sanders basically told us to do. Now
Yeah.
he was doing it through a campaign, but this is what he was basically telling us to do, that the 99% needs to come together and rise up against the top 1%. And somehow, after his election, after he suspended his campaign, all of a sudden that idea just went out the window. No, we still need to fight against the people who are at the top. And that doesn't mean Republicans. That doesn't mean independents. That doesn't mean necessarily Democrats. That means the people who hold the money. And most of us are the bottom of the 99%. Most of us aren't even in the middle. If you see that picture, I don't have it on me now, but if you see that picture I had, most of us aren't even on the middle of that chart. And that's what people have to understand. So when you have someone like Bill Gates who's buying up all this farmland, when you see Mark Zuckerberg who's buying land in Hawaii, I told you guys before, Mark Cuban just bought a town. He doesn't even know what he's going to do with it. They are making sure that when shit hits the fan, they're going to be fine. We are going to be the ones who will not be okay. What do we know how to do? How many of us know how to grow our own food?
Right. Right. And that was
Yeah,
purposely like left out in our education. So now it's up to us to re-educate ourselves on all that, on how we used to live, but also do it differently because times have, changed and naturally, we have to evolve.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out the super chat, and we have 10 minutes left. Thanks so much, Diane, for the super chat. Idea: an online pledge aimed at Dem voters to withhold their money and votes for any sitting member of the party until it passes the top three demands. What do you guys think about that?
All I
sounds
put.
good.
Yeah, I'm all for withholding your vote. Right, I'm all for that. Will the Democratic Party sycophants go for it? I, I doubt it, but
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
the people already try to build the
education.
movement with are already not voting for them anyway. So
Whoop,
we
whoop.
see. It's a good idea though. I'm not knocking the idea.
Yeah, good idea. They'll still get a lot of funding and from the donor class.
Yeah, I want to go to something. I want to go to something Savvy said as well. I don't know if it's Franco just froze there,
Hello,
Can you guys hear
but
me?
Franco.
I'm sorry. Is
We
that
hear
just me
you,
or
Can you
but
guys hear me?
is Franco there?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, go
Did I
ahead.
cut out?
you froze for a second.
Okay. What was the last bit you guys heard?
Um,
Not much.
Dang, I forgot what I was saying. Sorry.
Why you figure that out? I just want to quickly go to something that Savvy said earlier about how it's about class struggle, and people used to say that, but now a lot of people seem to forget about that. And when I say people, once again, I'm talking about the divide on the left, because I see the popularity of ridiculous terms like Red Brown Alliance, which a lot of
Oh
people
my
was
god.
afraid to debunk. A lot of people were afraid to debunk that, but I went right at it because we had on our General Strike Summit, we had the Michigan leader for the Kellogg strikes. He endorsed the idea of working with people you disagree with in order to accomplish class-based goals. And I and many other leftists have been smeared as Red Brown Lions for repeating that same idea during the Medicare for All march. They would say, "Oh my God, look at this conservative that's marching for the Medicare for All. You guys working with Republicans and conservatives. You guys want to build a Red Brown Alliance." We got to reject that. That's why what Savvy says is extremely important, man. Don't let them redirect your anger at your neighbor. We got to have critical love for our neighbor.
I mean, the way I like framing it is it's not even the top 1%. I mean, it's this top 0.1% versus everybody else. And even if you're a billionaire, even if you're a millionaire, even if you're a 10 millionaire, you still have more in common with people who work for a living than the billionaires. I mean, this billionaire class is just totally it's a totally different animal. And I mean, the other thing I like to say is just while they have common interests, the billionaire class, they're not necessarily a monolith. And I don't mean that there's some of them who are going to help us, but they are going to be cutthroat with each other. And I think it's possible to use that against them. I think it's to try to find ways to use that kind of competitiveness, because they'll try to grab at each other and take down each other. Like if we're doing a big wealth tax and they see their wealth drying up, I mean they'll start attacking each other and trying to grab the money from each other. I just think it's possible. I just think it's a mistake to not see them as also very competitive and cutthroat with each other.
Yeah, these are unconscious people, and I covered this recently this week with Rob. Shout out to him from Political Fight Club, Charles Anderson, and Emmanuel from the Political Matrix with Marcus Cage and his other co-hosts. That these billionaires are not happy. They see therapists. They don't know who to trust. They're in a constant state of depression, trying to think about, oh, what do I have to do to impress my peers in the next time? Do they even like me? Do they just like me for my money? I mean, I don't feel bad for them, but that's just an indication of how they're not happy people. They're not conscious, right? They're enslaved by their desires to be accepted by their peers. They think that money is going to make them happy. They're secure, but are they truly happy? I don't think so. So another thing that we should do is help each other be more conscious individuals. Let's be better than these billionaires. Let's treat each other with more understanding and compassion rather than allowing them to divide us and live in this state of confusion, because that's what they want. That's what they pay billions of dollars for to the media and to our education system, to make us confused and divided. So that is another important thing. Improving our mental health, be more spiritual. If you consider yourself an atheist, and read up on more philosophy all of that will help you be a more conscious person.
Agreed. So we have 4 minutes left. I want to go around the panel. Nick, what you got coming up next?
So tomorrow we got a great show from our Saturday show. We're gonna have Comrade Misty and Pasta join me tomorrow on my Saturday show. Should be a great panel. We're gonna talk about Biden's war crimes, the crackdown on the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and we're gonna touch on some of the topics we discussed now with the divide on the left, right? So, also going to ask Pasta about his time in Honduras and in Nicaragua and ask what he's seen directly. And I know Convo Cows, they was recently covering Ortega's inauguration speech. So I'm going to ask them directly what they saw from there. So tomorrow should be a great episode. So make sure you guys subscribe and hit the bell as well.
Franco?
Yeah, you can find me on Frank Analysis on YouTube, Rockfin, and Odyssey. On Twitter, I'm at B43Franco. If you have not yet checked out my channel, I had a lot of great interviews recently. One with Max Blumenthal that I highly recommend on BreadTube, and also the Roni Rona narrative. And next week, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I usually do things over the weekend and plan out what I'm going to do. But I do a lot of panel discussions. Savvy Sabs, Nick have been guests on, same with other members of Revolutionary Blackout and a bunch of other independent media content creators where we discuss our agreements, disagreements, and at the end of the day, we end up having a great time. Interviews, solo videos, you can find all of that on Frank Analysis.
Eric?
Yeah, that interview with Max was great, Franco. Of course, he's always great.
Thank you.
I posted my list of demands and some other things on a web space at erictred.com. Basically, if you just take my name and make it into a .com, it should lead you there. So if you want to check some of that stuff out. And otherwise, doing producing on Savvy Sab show. So check things out there. We'll see you in the chat.
All right, cool. And if you want more Savvy, join me at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. We're going to talk to Dr. Karim Batesh and Peter Beattie, who you guys know from the International Leftist Coalition. We're going to talk about, I know, they're really cool. We're going to have this discussion about, is life better abroad? So all of us have lived abroad. We're going to talk about our experiences, and I think it'll be really cool for you to hear. Other than that, guys, thanks so much for coming on. This was awesome. We should do this again.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Keep up the fight.
Bye.